Well, or if not that, I think what you just said is true, but also just there's not a lot of oxygen for reporters who want to report against the narrative, right? You don't work, you're accused of terrible things. I mean, any reporter, look what they've done to Seymour Hersh, for goodness sakes. I mean, any reporter who actually tries to bring truth to a debate or a situation like this is, as has happened to you as a military person, attacked in a very, very ad hominem, nearly career-ending way. So there's a lot of reporters kind of going along to get along. And I also think there's a lot of reporters who aren't very bright, right? Like, let's talk about, no, it's true.
Well, Trish, that's what I usually say about the generals.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like, I'm not seeing any big stars these days, in the world of reporting. But I want to talk about just some basics about who's winning and who's losing. But you brought up the atrocities, and I did want to talk to you about Bucha just for a minute, because I did quite a lot of reading about it. When I heard it, my sort of BS detector was like, oh, well, that's just like way too perfect for the propaganda campaign. Is that true? But you don't want to dismiss it. If it is true, there was a lot of suffering and people should be obviously punished for it. But I read a piece by a guy named Jason Michael McCann, who did a kind of a timeline of when the Russians left and when the mayor kind of did his first Facebook address and was not responding at all, like there were dead bodies in the streets. He was really happy. That was 3 days later, it seems. And that the Russians were gone, but some Ukrainian forces had come in. There's also an allegation in this piece that they were maybe under instructions to clean up if there were pockets of people supporting the Russians. So that's one theory. I don't know that it's true, but I'm really uncomfortable with the story of Bucha. I'm wondering where you sit on that.
Well, the first point is that I don't know. I only know what's being reported in the press. And again, the question that we learned to ask in the Balkans about these things was, first and foremost, qui bono? Who benefits?
Right.
Where is the benefit to the Russians associated with such an act? How does this help them? How does this improve their position? I don't see that it does. So then you go to point number 2. Well, this is just an out-of-control unit of criminals. I'm suspicious of that, because normally you don't see those kinds of events happen in the opening year of a war. Those kinds of things tend to happen after people have been engaged over a long period of time, and individuals are tired. They have not been brought out and properly rested, or they have been attacked and reduced in strength dramatically, and they lose cohesion and discipline breaks down. I don't see any of those things applying at this point. So I am suspicious. But again, Trish, that if you raise these issues and say, I'm unpersuaded by what I've seen, well, you're an agent for Putin.
Yeah. Or you don't care about no, it is absurd. Or you don't care about the deaths of these people. And of course, we care very much about the deaths.
Yes.
But for me, it's just, I was an investigative reporter at CBC for many, many years on a show quite like 60 Minutes. And, you kind of get that, and you may have this in warfighting situations, but you kind of get this feeling that something's just not quite right. And for me, it was part of that story was having the rape allegation thrown in. And I thought, wow, that really ticks all the boxes for woke Washington, doesn't it now? And so I don't have any evidence. There is some interesting stuff online by credible people who are questioning the narrative. But is this something we'll ever get to the bottom of, or will it always just be an argument forever, do you think?
Well, my suspicion, given conditions here at home right now, and I'm talking about conditions involving the economy, conditions involving the breakdown in the rule of law in many areas of the United States, the failure to secure our borders, to understand what or who is actually coming into the country, with 100,000 Americans last year who died from fentanyl overdoses. And we don't even begin to talk about the other deaths associated with various forms of illegal substances, overwhelmingly brought north into the United States from Mexico. We as a society are confronted with a number of serious emergencies. My suspicion is, looking at the market, the weak fundamentals of our economy, that these things are all going to effectively explode onto the scene in the next few months, to the point where, frankly, Ukraine will be on page 92.
Well, the baby formula catastrophe has already kind of done that, right? And
sure.
And the fact that I was watching this morning on the news and they were showing cartons and crates and pallets of the stuff down at the border for the people who were crossing illegally into the country. And I thought, people say that the Biden administration hates its own citizenry. And I have to say that kind of neglect of such an issue like this, I actually gasped when I saw the photograph of the baby formula.
Well, Trish, we have citizens inside the United States who are suffering. Yeah. We have citizens who need support. So all of the churches in the area where I live operate food banks. And these food banks have to be replenished on really almost a weekly basis, because there are so many people that cannot afford to buy food. Now, with the rise in gas prices, I wonder how many are going to be unable to travel to where they must in order to have access to food and medicine and care. I know this to some people sounds alarmist, and it certainly seems incomprehensible to many Americans who have always lived in an environment of abundance for their entire lives. But it's a very real problem. And that's why I think this will sort of diminish in importance to people. And we'll probably just walk away. And this is something that's very important strategically that deserves some mention, Trish. We, like the British, are essentially a maritime and aerospace power. We are not a global land power. In other words, we don't maintain armies of the size that continental powers historically maintained. And what this means is that we can go somewhere for a brief period of time in Eurasia, Africa, or Latin America, but we never stay. We are there for some period of time and then we leave. And this is a problem, because if you're a maritime aerospace power, you come in, you change the dynamics in a region, you alter the natural forces which result in some sort of balance of power, and then you pull out. Having deformed those forces, the people that supported you are inevitably on the list for annihilation because they supported you, and you go home and you forget about it. And you leave a lot of damage literally in your wake. Now, we went through this in Vietnam, and we've done it in many other places, and this more recently in Iraq and Afghanistan. And this is what I fear will ultimately happen in Ukraine. I'm quite certain that Mr. Zelensky will probably end up living somewhere out on the outskirts of Miami in a mansion that I'm told he owns.
Yes, yeah, me too. I heard that.
And no one will say anything.
No one will say,
well, that's all right.
Well, you mentioned Afghanistan, and I saw that obviously for a woman, or as a woman, for me, seeing last week in the news that the burqa is now back on the list for all women in Afghanistan, I thought, all those guys and women who fought there, and this is what we're left with.
Trish, in Iraq, our friend Saddam was a loathsome creature. I don't think very many people would dispute that point. On the other hand, even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah.
And he got a lot of other things right in terms of controlling those kinds of matters and creating the opportunity for women to get an education, to advance, and to play a role in society. I was just distressed on a scale that you can't imagine when I saw that Islam had been enshrined in the new Iraqi constitution that people from DOD and state had put together. That ultimately Islam is the inspiration for and the final word in all matters pertaining to the law in Iraq.
Yeah, these things never end well for women, do they? That's
the issue, Trish, is that why we went?
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. We could have put in any number of people to replace Saddam and his family, and then essentially said, "Look, we're going south. So to be Euphrates, if you need any help from us, let us know. But what we really want you to do is to do business with us and get out of this business of threatening your neighbors. And as long as you do that, we'll do business with you." If we had done that, not only would we probably have saved 1 million lives, but imagine how much better the situation in that country would have been for the people that lived there.